On this week's episode of the Jesse T Show, Darrah Brustein joins the show. How you doing, Darrah?
Great. How are you, Jesse?
Great. Thanks so much for jumping on. I know, we've connected through LinkedIn and social media, and wanted to get you in front of a few more people. I know you're already out there, and people are aware of what you do and who you are. But for the few people that don't know, if you could give them a little context on your journey and your story, we'd love to hear it.
You know what's funny is I always joke that I'm down to answer any question, but this is the hardest one for me.
I got to
Should be
come
the
with the heavy
easiest.
hitters right away.
It should be the easiest, but for me, not so much. I guess the quick overview is I'm a serial founder, I suppose, which sounds super annoying to say out loud. But after suffering a string of layoffs right out of the gate into the world of adulting and kind of being dealt a tough hand, I really did a lot of inner diligence and came to recognize that I had always wanted to start a business. I just didn't know what the business was. And I had been really drinking the Kool-Aid of what a lot of people had told me, that I was just an entitled millennial who couldn't wait her turn and needed to climb the corporate ladder. But when that ladder got knocked out for me 3 times in a row in the course of 3 years, not because of what I was doing, but because of the recession at the time, I just came to realize it was more important for me to ask why and get more in tune with what I truly wanted. And I thought back to my childhood and starting little businesses in my parents' sunroom, and my brother and I teaming up to sell the most fundraiser goods and doing all these other types of things, and just realized there was a pattern there and there was something to be explored, and that it wasn't no more or less risky to work for myself than it was to work for someone else. And that while everyone told me it was so much riskier to go out on my own, I just felt like it was time to take the reins into my own hands. So at the tender age of 25, that was 11 years ago, my twin and I teamed up and we started a credit card processing company, which is by no means what I had ever anticipated I would be doing. And through the 11 plus years of that journey, we have grown it through many trials, tribulations, and tears into a 38 state company that we now have fortunately gotten to a place where we know how to run it passively, and we have automated, delegated, systemized to a point where we spend about 1 to 3% of our time on that, with very happy customers still remaining. And through the process of growing that, a lot of other opportunities just sort of percolated, and I was listening and found myself starting other businesses along the way, not necessarily because I was saying, oh, I can't wait to start another business, but because I saw where my abilities met a need and just decided to say yes. So the first of those is a networking events company called Network Under 40 that subsequently also turned into Network Over 40, that became Atlanta, DC, Nashville, and Baltimore's largest networking organization for young professionals, and truly just became an embodiment of what I cared and believed in, which was the power of connection. And from there, when the recession was in full swing, and I looked around and thought, why does no one know these basic financial principles, which I know matters to you as well? I decided that I was going to take, again, the intersection of what I was good at and where the problem was, and blend them. And so I grew up always being a writer just as a hobby, and I grew up with two parents who were super intentional about teaching my brothers and myself about intentional financial literacy and responsibility. So I wrote a children's book on financial literacy for 6 to 9 year olds just because I thought it was important. And then as time went on, about close to 3 years ago now, time moves fast. I was at a retreat in Italy, and I had a deep, deep guttural sense that just was screaming at me. And it was telling me, Darrah, there's a new incarnation of your career on the horizon. You need to go figure out what that is and get to it. And I was actually really annoyed. And I said, I'm finally at a place where my head is above water. My businesses are doing well. I can finally enjoy the fruit of that. Why in the hell do I need to go do something else? And I spent about 6 months in a deep place of inner digging and excavation and diligence to figure out that really what the it was teaching and mentoring and sharing, because I really think that's what we're all here to do, is to do the thing, learn it, and then share it with others and bring them along with us. And much to my, again, surprise, it turned into coaching, which was something I also had no interest in doing, to the point that not only did I not want to do it, that I wanted nothing to do with it. Yeah. There's so many coaches out there that I just didn't agree with their tactics and strategies and where their intention was coming from. But it came to a point where I had people coming to me, and this sounds so vain, and I don't mean it to sound this way, but it's what happened. They basically begged me and they said, we'll pay you anything to coach us. What does it take? We'll call you mentor. Like, we'll call you whatever you want, but what does it take? And I finally said yes to two of them at the same time. And I said, listen, I'm going to do this, and this is what it's going to cost. But ultimately, if one or both of us walks away at the other side of this and we don't feel transformed, then I'm going to give you your money back and we're going to part as friends. And that started me on this new journey of sort of life coach meets business strategist combined, because it's really where I sit at this intersection and bridge builder in the world. And now where a lot of my work stands today with one-on-one clients and an accelerator program that I run for entrepreneurs who want to run businesses that don't run them.
Lots to unpack there. So want to
Yeah, I
go
was going to
back.
say, I don't have a short answer. I'm so sorry. Most people probably are like, hey, I'm Jesse and I'm a financial advisor.
Yeah. That's the last thing I tell people. I tell them about the fun shit first. As far as, where your pedigree came from, or where you feel like these innate or even circumstantial events came in when you were younger and you were doing raffle tickets with your brother and you had these things that you were up and you said the sunroom, like, what did that look like? Like, what were these businesses, these ideas, and where did the inspiration or even like the practicality of being able to do these things come from? Was there someone in front of you, a family member or someone that you were aligned with, or even like a movie star that you were like, man, I want to be like them? Like, where'd all that come from?
Yes and no. I think one, it was just intrinsic. And it's funny timing that we're having this conversation because, so I mentioned I'm a twin, and apparently recently was National Twins Day. And so I was like, I like want to go back and dig into my childhood with my twin brother and go reflect. And my parents recently moved to Panama, the country, not the city in Florida. And they sent me all my childhood stuff. And so I'm digging through this box of stuff and finding all of these interesting things. And I'm reading through my baby book and all these notes my mom had made about my personality, my brother's personality, when we were between 0 and 24 months, and seeing how much was identical to the person that I am now at 36, almost 37, was mind blowing. Like, I don't have children yet. I haven't seen it firsthand, front row and center, what it's like that a person's personality can be so ever present at such an early place. And so I think, to answer your question, it's the same reflection that when I think back, it wasn't that I was emulating someone. It's just from an early age, I liked to sell things. I liked to create things and sell them. I remember when my parents wouldn't let me pierce my ears, which now you can see are pierced, I made what was the prehistoric PowerPoint presentation and made poster boards on an easel and put on a business suit. And I think I was 8,
Yep.
and sold them on why I should get my ears pierced. Same thing when I wanted a cat and my parents hated cats. We got a cat because not because they just did whatever I said, because I was really good at convincing people of why it was great for both of us. And I remember sitting on the sun porch making friendship bracelets and jewelry and, selling things to my friends. I think a great example of this is when I was 8 years old, I was a cheerleader, and my mom was a hobbyist bodybuilder. And for cheerleading, we had to sell chocolate. And I took these chocolate bars to my mom's gym, where most of the people there, my mom was in her mid 40s. Most of the people there were guys who were about 23 and these like bulky bodybuilders. And somehow I convinced them, who ate like 24 eggs a day, to buy dozens of candy bars from me. And
It's awesome.
it just was in the DNA.
I have a similar kind of innate natural experience with that. So I grew up very humbly, had a great place right in front of the water, but that's as far as the money in my mind went. We were very broke growing up in Boston, and I used to buy, sell, trade comic books, baseball cards. I used to shovel snow for money. Used to set up carnival games. I'm not an engineer by any means, but I would find like anything I could do and like set up these little carnival games. My friends would give me like a quarter or like $1 and just be like, go play these and like win this stuffed animal that's been sitting in my closet for years. So like there was just always this, I guess probably because it came from a place of scarcity because we didn't have a lot. And so maybe that was kind of the push, but it was just really fun as a kid doing those things. And it's just like this need to be around people and to get into sales, which I did later on in life, which was, it's very similar, interesting path that people go down. Sounds very similar here. So as far as, the flip side to that, I was military for a while. And I'm going to use a cliche term because I was a sailor, but they talk about how smooth seas don't make for skilled sailors. And I say that in the sense that, what are some of the things that you've experienced in your life or in your business that were almost insurmountable or, roadblocks, or they were just put in your way so that you could learn how to figure it out and get around them, that like could have stopped you in your tracks if you had given up?
Whew, we could go for over the hour just on this, so I'll
Let's do it.
try to give you the Cliff's notes. The first two things that come to mind, I think, are some that just always stand out to me. The first is the doubt of my loved ones. That I remember there was a time when my brother Garrett and I were growing the credit card processing company, and we had suffered a lot of these blows. And I'll explain one of them as the number two. And my mom calling me. And I remember I was devastated. Like we had gone from finally being in a place after years of hard work, of seeing the light and saying, oh, we finally hit profitability and things look up, to all of a sudden losing this whale of a client. This is
Mm,
actually a different story, but losing this whale of a client and everything going back to close to zero. And I was a wreck. I felt like, oh my gosh, we finally had this momentum. And I called my mom thinking she would help lift me up. But instead, what she said to me was, you know what, Darrah, I don't think you can do it. I think that you should just throw in the towel and quit and go find a job. And this should be the end. Like, I think this is the sign that you needed,
wow.
which was obviously the antithesis of what one needs in those moments. Because, if anyone listening is like me, I already struggled with doubt of myself. I struggled with the imposter syndrome and not feeling enough. And then to have the people who you need to be your support system tell you, nope, we don't think you can do it either, was gutting. And fortunately, I chose one of two paths. Path one would be, yep, you're right, mom. I'm going to quit and throw in the towel and let your doubt in me, which is coming from a place of love and protection, but
Yep.
let that be what helps me call it quits. Or what I chose to do, which was to say, you know what, I'm going to let your doubt in me actually be the fuel that keeps me going. So thanks, but no thanks, and kept it moving. And then the
David
other piece,
Goggins calls that the cookie jar. If you've heard of David Goggins, where like
no.
he's been slighted or he's I'll tell you about him in a little while, but basically he adds these cookies to his cookie jar, and they're like little chips on your shoulder, and it's like he's an ultra marathon runner. He's this badass
Yeah.
military dude, and he's like
Oh,
anytime
yeah.
he
I actually just saw a video about him.
he's a game changer for the human race, honestly. But he goes into his cookie jar and he'll pull out that time where mom said no, you couldn't do this, or he'll pull that time he got beat up, and like he just, and that's what he uses for fuel for the fire. So it's interesting that you have a similar, like you used it as fuel versus a headwind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I also have a reverse practice of that for those moments of doubt and lack of confidence, which is what I call hype file, where every time someone says something nice and complimentary, I copy paste it or put it in an Evernote or wherever you want to. And I go back to it in those drought moments where I'm like,
Beautiful.
okay, all these people see this in me. Let me borrow that confidence and wear it until I can own it for myself for the first time or again.
Yep.
So it's interesting. It's like the counter of that. But the second part that I was going to mention was that again, when my brother and I had finally gotten to this place and we had overcome this whale client ending and these other things. And again, I think it was about 5 years in, we're like, oh, head above water. Poof, like things look good. Then we had an embezzlement.
Oh no.
And we went to zero. And again, at this point, the outside world, friends, family, they're like, okay, I think you guys should be done. Like, there's been enough now, and the universe is sending you a sign. But again, Garrett and I looked at each other and we just said, we kind of know it now. Like we know that we can get back there. And while it's painful and this is not how we would have asked for this to happen, and this is impacting our reputation because things have changed that were outside of our control and that mattered so deeply to us, we also just weren't there. Like we just knew in our guts that no matter what the data said, that we had to keep going.
Yep.
And I'm really glad that we did.
So huge pivotal moments. Was that something that you were able to redeem in any shape or form through like any court stuff, or were you able to get any of that money back, or just took it as a loss, kept moving?
No, we unfortunately lost even more than that because some of the relationships that we had with partners, like bank partners and stuff, we ended up
Mm,
having to pay. We chose to come out of pocket and pay for certain things to make right with their clients, things that had gone wrong because of
wow.
it. So not only did we lose, and like this is a residual business, which you're probably very familiar with. So not only did we lose like in that moment, we lost for years to come, and
Yep.
then also went into our pockets deeper, which wasn't a place we were in a financial real place to do. Like that was very painful financially for us and emotionally. So, no, and we also, because of the contracts that we had in that industry, just the way that it shook out with arbitration clauses and other things, like nothing really stood in our favor. And it was a very David and Goliath situation where if we're going to go up against the behemoths of the world, we just didn't have the financial fortitude to do it. So we had to make a decision, sort of this like spiritual decision. Is it worth it for us to have the gray cloud hanging over our heads and do what we know is right, but what's the real outcome going to be and what's the fallout potential through the process. And we just made the decision to put our heads back down and do the work again.
Yep. Yeah. It's you kind of you roll the sleeves up, you get back in the trenches, and so it sounds like you did that. And it sounds like you got it back to a beautiful place. So, what was that like in those moments where embezzlement is awful? It's a violation of trust at a core human level. It's a schism for your business. It just breaks apart everything that just you've built. So, what was the support like internally between you and your brother? And did you have external forces that were able to help you during those times where, let's be honest, like every business, their oxygen is cash flow. The same for your personal P&L, the same for your business P&L. You need cash and you need good amounts at certain times to do different things. Did you have any support financially during those times, or did you just have to completely bootstrap it and suck it up?
Sort of a combination. So I'd say from the financial support perspective, I make no qualms about it. And I think it's important that people talk about this because often we talk about bootstrapping, but that only works for people who have safety nets.
Yep.
Like if you don't have a safety net and you're bootstrapping and what happens to us happen to you, game over.
Rude.
And so we were really lucky to have parents who were in a financial position where they could help us, even though ego wise, it was the last thing we wanted to do as 20 somethings to say, yeah, mom and dad, can you help us? And so I ended up structuring a loan with my mom so that I would pay it back. And it didn't just feel like a favor, but regardless, it was absolutely a favor. She was in a position where she could do it. She wanted to support us how she could. And I made a determination that I would pay it back, and I paid it back faster than I anticipated. But I never wanted it to just be a gift or to be something where she was paying into us with no expectation of it coming back. But
Yep.
the other piece of it is what I think you're also referring to, which is the people and the support system that I just think one, like life is better lived when in community, and two, that you have to buoy yourself with people who are also, to use your language, in the trenches with you, whether it's literally like in the business with you, or I think often better people who are doing their own thing but have been through it or can understand the wear and tear that you're going through. And so, at that stage in the game, I was a part of entrepreneurial communities with people whose businesses were at similar stages and, had gone out intentionally collecting and curating friendships with people who were in those spaces so that they could help share resources. They could help be an ear to listen, unlike the friends who meant well, but were just like, go get a job. Like, why are you putting yourself through this?
Yep. Yeah, I don't know. I used to listen to Gary Vee a lot back in the day, and I've since gotten away from his content. But he talks about how people that have your best interests at heart will usually be the biggest naysayers because they're trying to do the right thing for you, but they don't realize that they're stunting your growth. And so he's always like, "Don't." It's easier said than done, and you've experienced this. But like, don't listen to mom and dad. Don't listen to your friends. Don't listen to your significant other. Like, have to follow your heart, right? And I think it's interesting that you've actually lived that, experienced that. So one of the dynamics I'm interested to hear more about is you and your twin brother and how that actually plays out in life and in business. Is this something where you complement each other, or is it like kind of like you fuel each other's fire, like you kind of want to like outdo each other? Like how does that work? What's the dynamic like?
We are the quintessential perfect business partners because of our opposite skills, abilities, proclivities, personalities, like you name it. I always joke with him that if you can share a womb, you can share a business because we just have this deep knowing of each other's ways from so long. But the irony that most people are surprised to know is we are not close. We are not actually socially close. We wouldn't talk very much if it weren't for the fact that we work together. But it also helps us a lot because it takes away some of like the personal stuff that could get in the way.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, there is this deep rooted trust that is it takes a long time to build with someone that didn't share a womb with you, you didn't grow up with. So, what has really worked for us and what we saw from the beginning 11 years ago was that he is your quintessential operator and I am your quintessential operations, vision, strategy person. And together, they really complement. And so, while he loves what I'd consider to be minutia, and that I can do, but it is by no means my highest and best use of my abilities, he is the person that I joke needs to be behind closed doors and shouldn't be talking to people, whereas that's where I naturally gravitate. So we have always found a good way. And even in those moments of, quote unquote catastrophe, like when mom said to quit or the embezzlement occurred, and I took it really hard, his immediate response each time was, what are we going to do? What are we going to do about it? What's the next step? And he was always so level that it really helped keep us afloat.
It's incredible having that sounding board, that safety net in a sense of even just someone to communicate with at that level. I mean, because there's a lot of people that run businesses, and a lot of times they're the solo like preneur in their family. Like they may have a spouse that's working, they may have a spouse that's at home, guy or girl, either way. But at the end of the day, a lot of times it gets really lonely, and like you're on an island, and you probably even experience this even though you have a partner. But like there's times, even I'm in a business that's full of people in a regard, but there's times where it's like completely quiet and I have my head down and I'm focusing on something, and like it gets lonely. So it's definitely good to have that sounding board and that communicator that can help you through those times. And so for both of you, and like building the business and growing through to kind of where it is today and getting it back on track, what was that process like once you got past the embezzlement, once you got dug deeper and you kind of went through it? Like, was it more of an ascension that was quicker because you had learned, or was it still kind of a process to get to where you are today?
Yeah, definitely the prior. It was more of the ascension. And two, there's this really important part of the whole process of growing businesses that has always been a North Star for me, which is this idea of first design your life, determine what it is that you want, know truly what your values are and what the why is behind what you're doing, and then reverse engineer the business to get you there. So by this point, I was super clear on what it is I wanted, and then more so what it cost in actual dollars to live that life, and then how I could reverse engineer to know each client is worth an average of X. When that accumulates by this many clients per month, and then there's the residual build of that, how many do I need to get to that sum? So it also gave me more motivation to say, now I know I need to have like these many referral partners and I need these many leads coming in, because they're going to convert to this many clients, and it's going to convert to this much income, which is going to convert, or this much revenue, which is going to convert to this much income. And that sounds complicated. It's actually very simple, and everyone can do this very simply in their life and their business. And that helped catalyze and catapult us. Plus, at that point, like you were referring to, there was so much momentum. I had relationships. Like this business was entirely built 100% on networks and relationships. So I had those spheres of influence. I had those connections. I had that trust. And as we had done the right thing in really trying times, those relationships solidified even further, where people felt like, even in the face of like great devastation in your business, you still did the right thing by our relationship and by our mutual clients. So that gives us more trust in you to give you more business as well.
Yep. Yep. And it's I've been around that industry. I was in banking for years, and I had, lines of business partners that would be either like First Data or some other companies would come in and they would help with that sort of stuff. But you said that it was unlikely, or it wasn't like you didn't think about doing this type of business. How did you get into credit card processing? Like what helped you choose that? Was it an opportunity you saw in the marketplace, or was it just kind of fell in your lap? Like, let's run with this. What did that look like?
Yeah, it came from my brother. And I think this is something I hear echoed all the time by aspiring entrepreneurs, is that they know they want to have a business, but much like me, they didn't know what the business was or should be. And determining that idea is obviously critical, because you're going to be pouring so much into the building of it. And I think that there's a couple of things you can do. You can either go looking for a problem to solve or find one that you have had yourself, or you can team up with someone who has the idea. And so my brother was the one who came to me and said, hey, listen, I've been studying this industry. There's no innovation in this certain way. It's all these major players doing things the exact same way. But what they haven't done is taken the brokerage model, which is tried and true in financial services, and applied it to credit card processing. And I've done the homework, and there's no legal reason why that can't be. And I think that we should do it, because ultimately it gives us a lean infrastructure, but it also gives us a much better competitive advantage to our clients, where the underwriting doesn't have to be the same everywhere. Like we can give them no contracts, we can give them better savings, we can really demystify what is a very confusing by design industry,
Yeah.
and a number of other advantages. And so we went in and said, let's take this thing and mix it with this, and voila, we have this new innovation in a space that is super crowded.
So I've heard you talk about relationships more than once, and I know networking, and you've put together some amazing groups that are spawned off of networking. You talked about centers of influence and referral partners and things like this. And for me, life is all relationships, and it's always been that way. When I moved down from Boston after the military to Georgia, I was like, I'm leaving all my relationships behind, and like I had a guy or a girl for everything, like whatever I needed, both legal and illegal. Like I could get whatever I wanted when I needed it. And when I moved to Georgia, I was like, shit, I got to start over. But I realized, kind of like with your business, that like once you do it, you can do it again, and you can continue to get better with it. And so for
Hmm.
me, relationships are everything. It's always about adding value on the front end. It's always about, what can I do to be of service to you? How can I help you? And really giving people a reason to fall in love with you or your business. And so talk to me about what draws you to the relationship side of things, the networking side of things, and what does that look like for you in building a new relationship with somebody?
So similar to the entrepreneurial inclination, it's been the same with relationships. When I look back at the baby book a couple days ago, my mom said, she's like, everywhere you go, you're like barely speaking and you already are asking tons of questions to people and you're already listening and you're already staring at people and making eye contact. Like I just had this natural gravitational pull towards it. And it was just in my wiring. And what was so interesting to me is that I never thought it was something special. I never saw it as a gift or something to build on because everyone has the ability to do this. Everyone has the ability and the wiring as social beings to build relationships and networks. But what I learned when I was in my early 20s through the reflection and mirroring of people in my life was that while we all are able to do certain things, others of us just have a natural gift at it. And no one else among my friends were like, we don't look at the world as this puzzle to put together. We don't see that Jesse and Rennie should know each other. Rennie's the guy who introduced us.
Oh yeah.
We don't see that A plus B equals, C squared. Like we don't see that, but you do. And you put it together and it's a compulsion for you. Like you just can't help yourself. And so it was just always something that I built on in that way. And actually, for the listeners, there's two things I want to mention that might be useful. One, to this exact mirroring exercise. If you are in that place where you're like, I am trying to identify what my gifts are, what my skills are, what my purpose is, on my website, just go to darrah.co. It's darrah.co/freebies. I have an exercise called the 9 questions to ask your network to help you find your path. And these questions were pivotal for me. This is how I realized that not only was I a connector, but it was my gift and that it was something that became the through line of like every business that I've shared about today. If you really pare it down, it comes to the power of connection. It comes to the power of connecting people to people and people to resources to better the outcomes for all involved. And when I knew that that was my purpose and that was my through line, it didn't matter what the embodiment of it was and how that played out in my job or my company. It just mattered that I was doing it. And so, for anyone else, this exercise helps you ask the people in your life these questions to get real answers to look for the patterns. So, asking things like, what is it, when is it that you see me at my most powerful, when is it you see me as the opposite, what's something you know about me that you think I don't know about myself, like, and so on, that help you really assess what is it that these people see that I'm either sleeping on and taking for granted or that I'm not seeing in the first place. And the second, actually, while you're on that page, is the shit no one tells you about starting a business, which really harkens back to what we were talking about, and especially what Jesse was saying about loneliness, that there's so much that people put on a pedestal and sort of like glamorize around entrepreneurship, but so much they don't tell you about the behind the scenes trials and tribulations that I get really transparent about in this, that just really based on the camaraderie and helping you understand that you're not alone in this and that these are some of the things you might be bound to experience. And that's okay. As long as you know that you're not alone in that, it helps you get through it. So back to your question, when I'm building relationships, for me, it always comes down to first and foremost, do we vibe? Like, are you just someone I want in my sphere, in my orbit? Is the energy good? Because if it's not, I don't care if you, like, for me, Oprah is everything. Like, if you're Oprah and we meet and our energy doesn't jive and something's off, and it's like, okay, there's plenty of people in this world. Let's keep it moving. If they're the person that's going to send you 10 clients a week, but you can't be yourself with them, or you feel like you're making concessions to try and be someone you're not, like, just keep it moving. There's so much more out there for you and for us. But, I have so many strategies for this. And actually, rather than go through like the step by step, because I could talk for hours about this, I'm going to give 2 more resources that I think would be helpful. One is with Network Under 40, I created a series called A Guide to Better Networking. And I think it's a 37 series of videos that are all a couple minutes long and break down really specific tools and strategies throughout the process of a relationship, from just meeting someone to being at a networking event and coming in and out of conversations gracefully, to how to nurture relationships when your network gets huge, and so on and so forth, like on and on and on. 3-way email introductions, like all of this stuff that'll help underpin and undergird your building a really successful network. But then similarly, there's a movement I started a couple years ago called Give It Forward. And I think this is one of the absolute best ways to practice what Jesse was saying about a value additive lens to relationships while also building and nurturing your network. And it's really simple. I recommend doing it for 30 days. You can do it as short or long as you choose. And it's about intentionally giving to one person a day with no strings attached. for that 30-day or whatever time period. So, for example, if today was one of my days, I might call or text Jesse or email Jesse and say, "Hey, Jesse, I'm committed to giving it forward to one person a day, and you're that person I want to support today. What's something that you're working on that I could help support? What's an introduction you're looking for? What's something you're challenged by?" Just helping tee him up to succeed and asking me, because that's the counter here. Because this will come back to you one day, and you're going to need to be prepared to ask for what you want and then be able to receive the help. These sound little, but they're huge. It comes down to self-love. It comes down to trust. It comes down to a lot of things. And Jesse will say to me, "I'm really grateful you asked. I've been looking to do XYZ." And then my response is, "I'm not a magic fairy. I can't promise to do the thing, but I can promise that I'm going to try." And so I would go out and try and find that resource, that connection, that fill in the blank. And sometimes it's just an ear. Sometimes people just want you to listen. And that is a huge gift in and of itself. But where the beauty comes in is if I get to go then find the resource, which is always attached to a person, or find the person, then I get to re-nurture that relationship and say, "Hey, I have this win-win introduction to make for you to Jesse." I get to do the introduction. Jesse gets to win the spoils of whatever it was that he needed. And this person, hopefully it won't be a one-sided introduction, meaning there's value in it for them too, gets that. And then they get to go off and spawn beautiful things. And I have just had two great interactions and benefit. You can't do anything in this world of service without it also benefiting you, meaning one, there's a karmic retribution to it. It will come back to you. And two, you're just going to feel really fucking good. So these things are not to be diminished. And I think this is such a simple practice that can take 5 to 10 minutes a day that will forever change the way that you view how you can show up in the world, what value you have to offer, and to deepen your relationships. And if you want to learn more about it, it's really simple. Just go to giveitforward.co.
So first and foremost, the thing I'll tackle, pun intended, is Rennie Curran introduced us, and he's a brother, good friend of mine. We're doing some good work together, and if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have been connected. And how did we even get connected? So he's reached out to me, and he's been on my podcast, and we've talked about different things, and like we share contacts back and forth. And I was like, which amazing entrepreneurs, thought leaders, badasses do you know that would be people that I would that I would get along with? Like all the things that you're talking about, like literal things I've said to him. And that's how your name came up. So it's funny. You talk about karma and being a good person and things coming back to you. I think that was part to do with it. And it's amazing just even asking. And when you talk to people, I do this a lot. Like I reach out to people and how can I add value? How can I be of service to you? A lot of times it'll say you already did. And it's just because you thought about them. It's the text message that you get fired back saying, "Thanks so much for even just thinking about me." And that little bit can go a long way. It can turn a bad day into a good day. It can turn, someone who wasn't running at full speed, maybe they give them that motivation, like I think you call it your hype file or your hype bank. Go back to that, and that makes people feel good. So as far as putting together this network, is it called Network Under 40? Okay. Putting together Network Under 40 and then Network Over 40. What was like the process like for doing that? How did it start out? Was it a blog? Was it something through LinkedIn? Like how did this actually work? And then obviously you create a ton of content and you have a lot of value add, so people are going to latch onto that. But like, how did you actually get the movement started?
Again, it was one of those moments where someone came to me with a problem and I was able to help them. So I said yes, and it turned into something by accident. So I went to Emory, and a couple years after I graduated, a friend moved back from law school, and she said, "Darrah, I've been looking all around the city. I'm a lawyer now. I'm trying to network and meet new people, but everywhere I go, I'm either getting hit on, sold to, everyone's my parents' age, or they're all in my industry." And I laughed and I was like, yeah,
So true.
sucks. Like, I'd been building the credit card processing company, been going to all the networking events. I typically was the youngest, often the only woman, often having to like figure out, does this person really want to do business? Or are they trying to like go get a drink because it's something else? Like it was so convoluted. And I thought, I don't know where that place is. I actually don't think it exists. But I said, as you know, my favorite thing in the world is to connect people. So why don't I just start it for you? And, for anyone who's listening in Atlanta, we went to the Warren in the Highlands because I knew the owner. And I just said, "Hey, can I bring some people out on a night where you don't have a lot going on and bring you some foot traffic and bar revenue?" And she said, "Absolutely." And that was March 11th, 2011. And 94 people showed up, 90 of whom I knew.
That's great.
And the energy was electric. And everyone just said, "This is awesome. Like, we've never been able to be ourselves like this. We've never had so much fun. It has never felt like social first, business second. And so much fruit is bearing from this. Can you do this again?" And I said, "Sure, why not?" And that hasn't stopped. since then. And every month we've had more than one event in Atlanta. And then funnily, through relationships, I became friends with another guy in Atlanta who's an entrepreneur named Eric Holtzclaw. He showed up to one of the events and I didn't think anything of it. And then one day I wake up to a Google alert and it says my name and then it says Inc. Magazine. And I said, huh. And then the article title is something almost exactly like why networking events suck. And I was like, oh no, like, what does my name have to do with this article? And so I immediately open it and read it, and it's lambasting all of these networking events. And then it says, except for this one event in Atlanta, Network Under 40, run by Darrah Brustein, that is getting it right. And I was like, what? And then I look at the byline and it was written by Eric. And all of a sudden, I had this onslaught and this outpouring of interest from people all over the country and even all over the world saying to me, how do you do this? We want to do this too. And that's what sparked the idea for me to systemize it, bucket it, and start expanding into other cities like mini franchises.
Serendipity, right? Having that one person that showed up, the power of networking, and then you see that article, you're like, shit, what happened?
Yeah, I was like, what did I do?
You thought you were gonna be like roasted, and it was gonna be over before it started. And so,
Exactly.
94 people is great for your first event. I mean, that's fun, and those are people that are, you said 90 out of the 94 are your connections. I mean, those are people at some level that you're have some connective tissue with, and it's almost like a party of your friends and family. Like you have all these people showing up, and they're connecting and they're growing. And so, was it a continued hit from there? Did you have some lulls? Like, what were the next few events, and then like bring us to today, how it's doing?
Yeah, it kept growing for a while to the point where around year 4 or 5, we were selling out events between 400 to 600 people every month. And then we couldn't fit in any venues. Like there weren't enough venues around town that we could keep it fresh with
Right.
that could fit that many people and park that many people. So we started picking events where we would sell out, but they'd be smaller. So obviously now we're in quarantine, so we're not throwing in-person events. Everything is virtual. And
Yep.
we immediately and quickly pivoted just because we wanted to continue to serve our audience in that way. And it's been really successful and really fortunate that we've had corporate partners who have said we want to stay engaged with this community, especially the young professionals. So we want to support and make that a reality.
I want to touch on that in a second. I want to touch on COVID and how it's affected it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, go for it.
Yeah, just so how is it like being in that business where it's face to face? It's you're kissing babies, shaking hands, kind of thing. You're in the mix. Like, how has that pivot been? I know you've had support, but like initially when you saw what was going on with COVID and then we're shut down, like how did it feel? And then what was your immediate response before you saw like what the corporate sponsors were going to help you with?
Yeah, it felt intimidating at first because for 9 years, we literally celebrated our 9-year anniversary in Atlanta. And then the next day or two, we found out, people, this was like really serious and we were going to have to quarantine
Yep.
and that we weren't going to be able to host events. And we didn't know how long. I think at first, like many people, we thought maybe a few months.
Yep.
And we thought, okay, we can definitely get through this. I had historically, in my own like personal brand side, hosted a 10,000 person, 16 country virtual summit. So I was like, I know how to run virtual events. I know how to make them really engaging and interactive and value rich. So I wasn't worried about how to do it. I was more worried about how would the audience respond to it because we had never introduced this to them before and they had never participated with us in that way. And we got really lucky. It was actually BlackRock who came to us first, and they were new to Atlanta with the headquarters. And they said, listen, like we already wanted to work with you. Our space wasn't ready. We want to support the community, especially this population. So what do you need? And that was such a beautiful gift to us because we just felt like knowing that there was a company that would partner with us like BlackRock and give us that amount of care and consideration to help us really do what mattered to us to continue to serve our audience gave us enough space for the first few weeks to say, okay, let's just make this a home run and talk to our audience and listen to them rather than be in a frenzy, which we wouldn't have done anyway. It's not our MO, but it would have been a natural byproduct, I think, for a lot of people. And then from there to just keep staying nimble. Like, whereas back in the days of in-person events, we were always planned out 6 months in advance. Like we
Yep.
knew where everything was going to be, when it was going to happen, who was doing what, like it was all way in the future. This has really changed that where we just didn't know, especially for months 1 through 4, how long this was going to be, what people's attention span and need and interest would be. And so we've just kept it really tighter timeline and we continue to survey our audience and learn what they need and what they want and talk with our partners and see what's working for them and just keep iterating in real time. So it's just definitely been one of those moments where, again, as an entrepreneur, you just have to be ready to roll with the punches.
Talk about pivoting and planning. Both need to be really good, like in your business and what you do. And in May, I had a 9-day spiritual quest to Peru booked and ready to go. I was going to go sit with ayahuasca in San Pedro and learn about some stuff. And a week later, I had a 200 and something person event planned over at the Galleria area, Rome, and it was Revolution ATL, and it was going to be all these entrepreneurs and these business owners and business leaders getting together, and just there's a few things going on there, and then all of a sudden, out the window and shut down. And so, like, what do you do? How do you respond? And I think you have to be nimble. You have to have a contingency plan, and if you don't, you better figure one out really quick. And so I like how you've been able to pivot. And so now, are you running these meet up networking type of events through like a Zoom call? Like what are we doing here? And like, how has it been since, it's pivoting to that platform?
Yeah, this is an interesting one too, because I had an assumption that I needed to have a really cool, fancy platform that had all these interesting products and features. And I spent so many hours studying different platforms and testing them and demoing them with my team. And then I just kept going back to Zoom and feeling like there's no friction here. Everyone's familiar with the
Yep.
platform. Let's just stick with that. And so we've just really had to stay focused on what is it that we can do to serve their need, and who cares about the mechanism of how it's delivered as long as
Doesn't
it's
matter.
working. And so we've really focused on lead generation events. We did a who done it murder mystery with a bartender who taught us how to make prohibition era cocktails, because Buffalo Trace was our partner. And we've just gotten really creative and said, what do people need right now? Maybe it's just some levity and fun, or maybe it's they need business pipeline, or maybe it's they need fill in the blank. And we, like, at one point it was on redesigning your career in the space, and we partnered with Northwestern Mutual. And so it just depended on the moment. And we just continued to look at it that way and just said, you know what, reduce friction, reduce our internal stress, just use the platform everyone's really familiar with and keep it moving.
Yep. Yep. And you talk about as far as, you know, everything that you've done, and you've done a lot of different things, and things fall into your lap and you run with them, or things that you've created and you've made them amazing. One thing in my research that hasn't come up yet was a podcast. Are you still doing your podcast?
Which one?
Well, I saw one. Is there more than one?
It's sort of tricky. So I have a series with Deepak
Okay.
that's not technically a podcast, it was a video series that some would call a podcast. And then I have a podcast called Up and At Her that was a
Yes.
limited release series with my friend Elizabeth, who also is an entrepreneur. She's a wine expert and sommelier. Like, I think she's the number one podcaster for food and wine. And it was never meant to be ongoing. We were just like, we keep having these conversations that we want to share. And so we did a one-time limited release series.
Beautiful. So what are some of the things that podcasting, or even quasi podcasting, like limited series, have taught you, and how have they helped you in your business and your personal life?
I think I'll reflect to the Deepak thing, because this really was the catalyzer for me around the borrowed confidence idea. That, in my dream fantasy world, I might have one day collaborated with one of my, intellectual heroes, Deepak Chopra. And then through a series of things, I ended up befriending him. And he came to me one day because I nurtured the relationship. I remember it was December 26th, 2 years ago. And I sent him an email. My in-laws, well, soon to be in-laws, had just left for Christmas. And I said, I've been reflecting on this year, and I'd gotten to collaborate with incredible people that you remember, he and Adam Grant and Seth Godin and all these wonderful people. And I thought, I just want to circle back with them and just tell them again how grateful I am for that collaboration, and remind them that I'm here in their court if they need anything in the upcoming year. And I sent those emails and got really lovely responses. And within 15 minutes of sending it, Deepak responded, and he's like, I've been reflecting too. And I think that you can help me make my message more relatable and understandable to people. And I was truly dumbfounded. I was like, me? Like, there are billions of people on this planet. Why me? And I was like, okay, this is one of those fork in the road moments again. You can either choose to doubt it and be like, and like push back and miss this opportunity potentially. Or you can be like, nope, Deepak sees something in you that you don't see in yourself. Borrow that confidence, wear it and own it, and let it ride until you can see it for yourself. I remember 2 weeks after that email, we were recording, and a week later we had launched it. And I remember after our first recording, he stopped and he's like, Darrah, I don't compliment people like this for the sake of it. He's like, but you are exceptional at this. There's more for you here in this. And it planted the seed where now, like, spoiler, no one knows this yet because it hasn't been greenlit, but I'm working on a television project
You
now.
heard it here first, the Jesse T Show.
And it's these things, and it wasn't because Deepak set me up for that. It's because he planted a seed.
Yeah.
And the seeds that we plant in our own mind and we water them through our other thoughts, our actions, the people we meet, are the things that grow. And I chose to let that seed plant and nourish it because I knew in my heart of hearts that he was right. And I just was too afraid to own it because I chose to doubt myself prior to that. And so that, it's not an explicit learning that I had through doing podcasting, but it did teach me that until you really step into what your skills and gifts are and own them, you're going to be blocking people. And this is sort of the counterpoint of this, that whether it's a podcast, whether it's posting on social media, whether it's mentoring someone, whatever the mechanism is, the way that I always look at this is if you are blocking the blessings you could be giving to someone else through what you have to share in this world, whether because you doubt it, you don't think it's special or unique, or whatever the reason, you are causing them potential harm in the sense that you are blocking them from that gift that they needed. So get out of the way and be the vessel of that message. And so that's one of the main things that I learned through kind of stepping up into sharing content and all of these things, whether it's through the writing with Forbes or through Deepak's series or through a podcast in limited release or through my social media channels. It's that stop taking yourself so seriously. Stop doubting and second guessing. Like, things that come to your mind, other people can find value in and learn from. It can really help them on their journey. And you may never know. They may never tell you, but just trust and do it anyway.
Isn't it interesting, the limiting beliefs we put on ourselves, and you keep going back to imposter syndrome, and everybody at every level has that. No matter, you could be LeBron James, and sometimes he probably doubts himself, probably even very like critically so, just because he's at such a high level. And obviously he can step into his greatness. And I'm a Michael Jordan fan. He's much better than mine, but still, he's one of the greatest to ever do it. And everybody at every level, whether you're a brand new business entrepreneur or you're the top of the game, right? You're going to have those fears, and it's what you do to get around them. So in that same vein, you've talked about Seth Godin, amazing, Deepak Chopra, amazing. You mentioned Oprah, really quickly, a huge inspiration. Are these the people that you're getting your downloads from? And like who are you going to on that level in terms of even just learning or listening to what they're doing and implementing it into your life so that you can succeed in your business?
Yeah, I mean, for me, one of my top 3 values is growth and learning, like kind of hybrided into one. So I am perpetually learning and growing. And actually, at this stage of my life, I'm choosing a lot through memoir, like just reading people's stories and histories, 2 of the most recent ones being Alicia Keys and Trevor Noah's. And for me, I feel like there's so much to learn from how people have paved paths before you. I call this mentorship from afar. Trevor and Alicia may never know that I exist, but I've been able to learn and glean a lot from their experiences that they have shared out in the world for public consumption. And Deepak was that for me before I knew him one-on-one, where then the mentorship became more traditional. So yes, I definitely learn a lot through people in those ways. I am a forever student, and I think that when I stop being a student will be when I die.
Yep.
So yeah, I'll continue to glean and learn. And when I interview people like Seth and Adam and Shaq and Bill Belichick and all these people, I'm gaining so much. Like, I learned so much through the golden nuggets that they're sharing, and even reading between the lines. Like, I remember when I got to interview in person Cam Newton, and just paying attention to the nuance and how he showed up and how he treated people and how he put himself together and his energy and his presence. Like, all of these things, whether spoken or unspoken, I was learning from. So I'll continue to do that.
Yeah, if you're going to be any kind of decision maker, leader at any level, you have to be a student. You have to keep learning, because you're going to get passed up, you're going to get stale, you're going to get crusty, and you're not going to be able to add value to people if you stop learning. And even just from one learner to another, I'm obviously a seeker. I'm the guy going to Peru to do plant medicines. Like, I feel like it's enjoyable for me. I love to learn new things. And there's like this childlike kind of wonder behind a lot of that. So it's important to have those heroes in front of you, or those people that can help bring you along, so that you can pass it along to the next up and comers as well. And selfishly, you can have fun while you're doing it too. So as far as for you and giving back, like a one key message takeaway, if I'm an entrepreneur at any level listening to the podcast or watching it, what would you say to me as far as helping me get through any season of my business? Like, what's a good mindset piece for me?
Whew, just one. I mean,
If
obviously it
you have
depends.
more than one, go more than one.
I mean, it certainly depends on the season of the business, but I think one of the lessons I had to learn really early on is that there isn't some knight in shining armor that's going to come in and make your dreams happen for you. That while there's a paradox here that everything happens in collaboration and things happen best and fastest with other people, you can't sit around waiting for that person to save you and do it for yourself. Like you have to be that person. And with that, you have to be your own biggest cheerleader, that you can't expect all these people to come around and help hype you up, like I was talking about before,
Yep.
in order for you to get off the couch and do the thing. And that just like any other thing in your life, like people talk about this with having kids or other stuff, there is never a perfect time. And if you're going to sit around and wait for it, then there's a million other reasons and excuses that are going to hold you back from it as well. So the more that you can, well, actually, too, I think the most important piece of all of this is that no one can shortcut or sidestep the mindset piece.
Yep.
That I don't care who you are. I don't care what you're building. I don't care, like you're saying, if you're the LeBron or you're just starting on like the Pee Wee team, you have to get the mindset stuff there. And you're never going to master it. It's part of our destiny to be back on this body, like in this earth as the souls that we are, that we have work to do and we're going to stumble, and that's okay. It's about how you get up and keep going. But we can't kid ourselves and think that we can keep going on the journey, whatever that journey is that we've chosen to go on, without identifying like what are the hurdles and blocks that I have in my own mind. How can I decouple the narratives that have been given to me by my family, my friends, society, culture? What is actually mine? Ask why over and over and over again till you really get to the root of something. When something is going in your head, like the narrative for me was always, you're not good enough. You're not good enough. You're not good enough. And I got to the root of it and I was like, well, why? Why am I not good enough? Who said that? And is that mine or is that someone else's? And is that feeling fact? And I started to realize, I was like, no, that was my dad's story that got passed down to me from his dad. And that was, this thing that just kept getting solidified and cemented through the data that I kept adding to it to say, oh, well, there's more evidence. But I could also have looked for the counter evidence. So these are, I think, some of the most critical things to do at every stage of our entrepreneurial or life journey.
And with that, we drop the mic. Beautiful.
Should I literally?
Yeah, you could. I would, but mine's kind of on this arm thing. So.
That's true.
So amazing, great message, powerful. I'm very lucky that we connected, and I'm very excited to hear more of your journey as it goes along and be a cheerleader for you. She's the amazing, mighty, and powerful Darrah Brustein. I'm Jesse T. Please be sure to catch us on next week's episode of The Jesse T Show.